This is our first notes for Unit 4, and there are lots of them. Obviously, you can tell from the packet that you have. So let's get started, okay? Manatee, by the way, you're aware of that. I hope by now some of you have never seen a manatee before. And this is one of my favorite birds, a magnificent frigate bird. That's a male with the pouch. They fly around over the beach. Not this far inland, but definitely over the beach, you can see them. Our beaches, yeah, okay. So we need to kind of take a step back, and this is from biology, okay? So kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. We touched on this a little bit when we learned when I mentioned how the proper way to write or type a genus and species name, but physical characteristics, yes, we were working on that with our branching key and our dichotomous key. We were working with physical characteristics. But nowadays, it also goes into DNA as well. So there are different domains and then kingdoms. So when I first started teaching, there were just the 5 kingdoms, but now it's a little bit different. So the archaea or archaeobacteria, and then eubacteria, and then eukaryotes. So there's 2 different kinds of bacteria, and then eukaryotic organisms. Those are organisms, remember, that have a nucleus, like our cells, animals and plants, and single-celled organisms as well, except for bacteria, which are prokaryotic, right? Okay, so remember, so bacteria versus archaea, and then eukaryotic would not be in here. So you've got the bacteria cell wall. It's just a protein, and then these genes and the archaea are more similar to eukaryotes. The bacteria are less similar to eukaryotes. That's the main differences there. And these are now the 6 kingdoms. So there's archaebacteria, eubacteria, protists, those are the single-celled organisms, fungi, which are funguses. They come in single-celled as well. There are single-celled protists that are fungus-like, but so just imagine, molds and funguses and mushrooms and things like that. Plants and animals, plantae and animalia. So the hierarchy is, what's on top and what goes down to the bottom, right? So that's what hierarchy means. So kingdom, phylum, subphylum, and I don't typically include subphylum and suborder, but there's also other ones that could fit in here as well, especially when it comes to plants. But because we need to fit in these words, cetacea, all whales are cetaceans, and vertebrata. So a chordate has a spinal cord, but not necessarily a vertebrae. We're going to get to those in the future. You'll see. So that's why the subphylum is there. So kingdom, phylum, subphylum, class, order, suborder, family, genus, species. And you should know that you should know that. All right. And then at the end, you've got that binomial nomenclature. It literally means two-name naming. Binomial, 2 names, nomenclature, naming. And that's how we refer to organisms in the scientific realm, because if we don't, then it can get very confusing. If we just use common names, like dogfish, for example. I don't know if you've ever heard of the term dogfish, but there are like 20 different species that people call dogfish, but they're all different species. This is Orcinus orca, the orca whale. Please don't call it a killer whale. We've gone over that before. So when typing, remember, be sure to italicize, as seen above, Orcinus orca, okay? And then when handwriting, make sure that you do the same thing. You have capital, lowercase, lowercase, okay, the second one, and then you underline it, because handwriting is all italicized, right? So in order to determine the difference, and you're going to sketch these orcas in the box. You've been doing that on your paper. Can't wait to see what some of those look like. Okay, we're going to have lots of practice drawing in this unit. So here's another one, or 2 more, actually tiger shark, okay? So Kingdom Animalia, chordates, see, they don't have a vertebrae. They're in a different class. They're in class Chondrichthyes. They are your cartilaginous fish. Osteichthyes are bony fish. And then over here you have even a different, same phylum as a shark. They're animals, okay, the sea star, but this is an echinoderm. Echinodermata, we'll talk about those in the future also. And so, Acanthester planki and Galeocerdo cuvier. All right, so yeah, some of the scientific names are not easy to say. Don't worry if you can't say some of them. Well, you can say them just with practice. Okay, so one of our jobs to do, we've done this already, but a little practice won't hurt, right? So you're going to do this on your own in your notes in the future. So please don't leave this blank. It's going to be worth a lot of points. Don't leave these kind of questions blank. Remember, so step 1 or question 1, fish's shape is long and skinny. Go to step 2. And this one's not. Its shape is not long and skinny, so we're going to go to step 3. If the fish has both eyes on the top of its head, that one does. Go to step 4. If the fish has a long whip-like tail, it does not. If the fish has a short, blunt tail, it's a peacock flounder. Boom. Same exact thing that we did with our dichotomous keys. So you continue to determine what these are, but not now. We have to move on. Okay. So we're going to be making observations and lots of scientific illustrations with our notes. Okay. So from unfamiliar structures or specimens from key groups, and we're also going to do Cnidaria. Cnidaria are stinging celled organisms like anemones, corals, those kinds of things. Sea, jellyfish, okay? The organisms we're going to study are phytoplankton, zooplankton. So phytoplankton look like that. They're the plant-like plankton. Zooplankton are animal-like plankton. Plankton, the term plankton means cannot swim with the current. Against the current. They are always, the current goes, they go where the current goes. Okay. Echinoderms, echinoderm means spiny skinned. Those are your sea stars and sea biscuits and things like that. The crustaceans, crabs, lobsters, shrimp. Bony fishes, including seahorses and eels. The cartilaginous fishes, sharks and rays and skates. Macro algae, which is seaweed. Algae is seaweed. Marine plants, very special kind of plant adapted to marine environments. And so today we're going to talk just about bacteria, all right? So types of marine bacteria. Prokaryote, remember, has no nucleus. They come in different shapes, spheres, rods, and spirals, and rings. There are some pictures of them around there. There you see some Baltic Sea bacteria, some North Sea sediment bacteria, Pacific sediment bacteria, and Rosiobacter, an abundant marine bacterium. So they're very small in comparison to eukaryotes. You could have 100 in the space of one of your cells, like one of your skin cells. They thrive, I'm not thriving. They thrive in detritus, right? That's the particles of dead organic matter that collect on the bottom of the sea floor and on anything else laying down there. Decay bacteria are very important for recycling nutrients back into the food chain, the food web, particularly the nitrogen cycle. Most abundant type of life on Earth, yes. There are bacteria all over you, and many of them are good. Most of them are good than bacteria on your table. There's just bacteria everywhere. You just can't see them because they're so small. Some of them are floating around in the air. Not viruses. Viruses are smaller, different. And they're found in every marine environment. If it wasn't for bacteria, then many of them form the basis of the food chain. So ecosystems would break down. Generalized body plan for a bacteria should be for bacteria, because bacteria is plural, a bacterium, singular, bacterium. So their DNA is like not enclosed in a nucleus. It's not encapsulated. It's just in the cytoplasm, inside the cell wall. They have a cell wall that's important to know, just like plants. And they also have a cell membrane. Okay? They don't have to have flagella. That's just only in some species. Okay? Heterotrophic bacteria. What is a heterotroph? A heterotroph eats something else. It gets its food from something else, okay? Other organisms. And most of them are decomposers, decay bacteria. If it wasn't for these little fellas, our environments would be piled up with dead stuff that wouldn't break down. They recycle those nutrients for the base of the food chain. Nitrobacter and Nitrosomus are two examples. Autotrophic bacteria, just like autotrophic organisms on terrestrial environments, like plants, autotroph means to make your own food, right? So organic compounds, make their own organic compounds. Some are photosynthetic, like I said, like these. Well, actually, no, not these. Purple sulfur bacteria would be chemosynthetic, okay? I believe. Maybe not, though. And these are definitely chemosynthetic. Hydrothermal vent bacteria. These are the ones that get their energy from sulfur, remember, or sulfur compounds, okay? Releasing it from the chemical compounds. So sulfur or iron compounds, methane or natural gas, and these guys form the basis of the food chain for hydrothermal vent communities where there's no light in the aphotic zone at the bottom of the ocean. The hydrothermal vent food chain. Then we have cyanobacteria, and these are some of the oldest organisms on the planet. Also called blue-green algae. They're photosynthetic. They look like this. They have fossils. They build these massive structures made out of stone, calcareous mounds, known to be over 3 billion years old, the fossils, okay? So here are some stromatolites that are built by bacteria, by these cyanobacteria. Just like coral builds a skeleton, these organisms, these bacteria build a skeleton as well. They look like this. Here are some in Australia, Bahamas, and then fossilized ones that are over 3 billion years old. And they're still being formed in these areas. They're very rare, though, but they played an important role in the accumulation of oxygen in the atmosphere many, many billions of years ago, which then helped other organisms develop. And there's a higher concentration of oxygen because they're among the first photosynthetic organisms on the Earth. And then you have archaea. Archaea bacteria, they're simple, primitive. They look similar to the oldest fossils ever found, 3.8 billion years old. They may be spherical, spiral, or rod-shaped. More closely related, according to that first little chart we saw, to eukaryotes than to bacteria genetically. That's related means, okay? Some are extremophiles. We know an extremophile is an organism that lives in an extreme environment. High pH, high temperature, high pressure, or the vice versa. Extremely low temperatures or something like that, like in space or something. And here are some right here with the flagella, multiple flagella, okay? Here's a hydrothermal vent area. That white coating on everything, that's a bacteria. The hyperthermophilic archaea that lives in hydrothermal vents, temperatures around boiling of water. So they love it there, and they form the basis of the food chain there. All right, let's move on up into higher organism, okay? So now we're going to talk about plankton, and so this is one of our goals here to determine this. Limited motility and drift in water currents. Like I said, anything that's planktonic cannot swim against the current. So if you see a fish swimming, that's not a plankton. However, some fish, like the sunfish, or otherwise known as the mola, that's good comparison in size. Very gentle creatures. They can't swim. against the current. They go with the current. So technically, a gigantic organism like that is still a plankton, still planktonic. Phytoplankton, of course, are the photosynthetic ones, and then the zooplankton are the animal-like ones. But even the larval forms, the babies of certain larger organisms, are planktonic in certain stages of their life cycle. Okay, like this baby fish can't swim against the current, goes with the current. At that time of its life, it's planktonic. Jellyfish, of course. This is the Portuguese man of war. Scientific name is Physalia physalia. Okay, so phytoplankton are those producers that absorb nutrients from the environment, just like all producers do, like plants, okay, and obtain the nutrition through photosynthesis. So here are some algae, unicellular algae. They're plant-like protists. Stychococcus basilaris from the waters surrounding Antarctica. And they, again, magnesium we know is necessary for chlorophyll to work and absorb sunlight. Nitrates for proteins and DNA. Phosphates for ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Phospholipid bilayers of the cell membrane, right? Some of them need silicate. Silicates are silicon dioxide. It's essentially glass. They make their shells, they make their little, they're called tests, actually, just like a test, you're right. They're the little skeletons of these diatoms, or something called a coccolithophore. I think I have some pictures of those. And so they need silicone to make their shells. Silicon dioxide is glass, just like this, like a window, glass, okay? And they're all photosynthetic. So algae are diverse, mostly aquatic. Some live on land. You know, when there's a green coating, maybe around your swimming pool or on your front step, like if you haven't power washed it in a while and it gets slippery, happens at school sometimes too. Those are terrestrial, but most of them are aquatic. Eukaryotic, that means they have a nucleus. These are not bacteria. They're not prokaryotic. They are eukaryotic. They have chloroplasts of different kinds. Green, brown, red, different color chloroplasts. And they don't have any leaves or stems or roots. They're not plants, but they're still photosynthetic. So diatoms are the ones that have a silicon dioxide glass-like material they make their shells out of, and inside they live inside. So their shells, when they die, become, it's called a frustule. And it settles to the bottom and forms these thick deposits called diatomaceous ooze. Look, if you picked it up, it would be like snot, okay, but not quite snotty. It would kind of fall apart. And then eventually, sedimentation, pressure, and in layers, right? Pressure and time, squeezes out all the air and water, and it makes something called diatomaceous earth, which is white powder. You can buy it at Home Depot or Lowe's. People put it in their filters for their pools. They use it for, I used to sprinkle it in the yard to get rid of bugs. It's natural, and it has other many, pool filter, silver polish, road paint, even in toothpaste. There's diatomaceous earth. You probably have brushed your teeth at one time in your life. Your parents have probably bought a toothpaste brand that has little coarse bits in it, right? To scrub the plaque off of your teeth. And it's diatoms. It's these frustules of glass. You don't swallow it. It probably wouldn't hurt you really. They're very small. They're not like sharp or anything like that. Okay, so they have a yellow-brown color due to a pigment called carotenoids. So some of them, colors like this. There are 6,000 species, approximately. Haven't discovered them all. Some are sessile. Sessile means they don't move. Sessile. And some are motile, meaning they can move around as the current's taking them. They reproduce asexually, so there's no sperm and egg moving around. And sometimes favorable conditions in the water cause them to have blooms, okay? And this is a diatomaceous or a bloom of algae bloom, okay? Too much nutrients, eutrophication would cause a bloom. So those are diatoms. Now we're talking about dinoflagellate. Dinoflagellate means two flagella, two flagella. So they have these long flagellum coming out of their test or their shell. Here's a coccolithophore. They have armored plates. Some of them have spines, some have pores, some have other ornaments on them. So these are dinoflagellates. And then we have protozoans. These are protozoan means first animals. So the first animal-like creatures were single-celled organisms called protozoans. They're animal-like protists, unicellular, single-cell, heterotrophic. They eat phytoplankton. They also probably eat other zooplankton as well. And there's approximately 50,000 different species of these guys. These are some neat ones. In Japan, they lived on the ocean floor 550 million years ago. And now they're on a beach. And you can scoop them up and look at them in your hand. And this is their shells. And they're just miraculously all different shapes. It's just really, really cool. Protozoans. So some of those protozoans we're going to talk about today are the foraminiferans. A lot of big words, I know, but it's said just like it's spelled. Foraminiferan. Look at it, okay? And it's under kingdom Protista. They have a test or a shell, like I said before, that calcium carbonate. So the other ones were called frustules. These are called tests. They have pseudopods. Pseudopods reach out and pick up tiny particles in the water and bring them inside. Most live at the bottom. Some species are planktonic. And they, just like the other kind of ooze, they can form a foraminiferan ooze when they settle to the bottom. And foraminiferan ooze can make chalk, limestone and chalk deposits like the White Cliffs of Dover in England. You may have heard of these or seen these, or even maybe you've been there, okay? So here's London, and you just go east a little bit, and this is Dover, and the White Cliffs are there. They're very famous. They've been in lots of movies and things. The White Cliffs of Dover. They're made out of foraminiferan ooze. All right, the next one is a radiolarian. The radiolarians also have shells made of silica, glass, just like the diatoms. They have spherical with radiating spines coming out of them. Pseudopods to capture food. These are the pseudopods again, reaching out, little stretches of cytoplasm with the cell membrane around them to pull things in. Right. Some colonies can reach 3 meters in length. So that's like, yeah, longer than the width of this diameter or the screen. Okay. And they make a radiolarian ooze when they settle to the bottom. And here are some amazing, diverse shapes of radiolarians. These are hand-drawn. These are computer images. Okay, this is a microscopic image of radiolarians. It just, looks like some fantastical crown or something like that somebody would wear in their head, or helmet for war. Just amazing. You can't look at that and think this is not miraculous. Life is just amazing. All right, the ciliates, phylum Ciliophora. They have many hair-like cilia, like little oars in the water, like a paramecium. But paramecium are freshwater. These are salt water, right? Marine species are usually found at the bottom, in the detritus. Some of them are symbiotic. They live with other organisms in one way or another. And now we're going on to the fungi. So we've discussed the plant-like protists. We've discussed the animal-like protists. And now we're discussing the fungal-like protists. They are also eukaryotic, which means they have a nucleus in their cell. The DNA is bound by a nucleus. Heterotrophic, so they need to eat something else or use another living thing for their energy. They can't make their own food. There's over 500 species that are marine. There's some that are freshwater. And of course, they are so important, just like the bacteria, for decomposing dead things and recycling those nutrients back into the food chain, food web ecosystem. And some of them are parasitic. So a fish can get a fungal parasite, just like you can get athlete's foot, which is a fungal parasite. You can get ringworm. It's not a worm, it's a fungal infection, okay? Living on you. Just a little bit of cream and it goes away. So some are symbiotic with algae to form lichens. Lichens can form like a thick dark brown or black patches on wave splash zones on rocky shores. Cold water only, so we won't have marine lichens here in Florida. If you want to see lichens, just go outside and look at one of the trees, and there'll be these green or red spots on the trees, and that's a fungus and an algae symbiotic relationship. But that's a terrestrial example. You want a marine example if you're ever going to discuss this in an FRQ or for some other activity or assessment. And that is the end of part 1 of, I believe, 9 different parts.